This is the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast, hosted by David Charlton, and you're listening to this podcast to help you build your own mental toughness so that you can support other people or your clients better. Either way, you will learn more about developing this plastic personality trait that all but guarantees that you will perform better and lead a more prosperous life. Today's episode covers a topic that fascinates me, and in all honesty, a topic that I could talk about all day. There's a common theme across a lot of sports where athletes find it hard to separate what happens in training or practice and what happens under pressure when they're competing. For me, there are two mindsets. There's a training or practice mindset and a trust mindset. And it's something I picked the brains of former professional basketball player Dre Baldwin last week to gain his wisdom. Last week, two themes stood out for me: how you go about your training and whether it's challenging you enough and in the right way, as well as putting yourself out there in pressure situations competitively. Today, though, I turn to Will Shaw, a highly qualified PGA golf professional and sports scientist who shares with me his expertise. It's a must listen if you're into golf, or if you're looking to understand better what things to consider when learning this skill of transferring your skills under pressure. We go on to touch on how you can build your confidence and resilience when planning and executing your practice, as well as a whole lot more. Hi, Will. So, trying to transfer your skills from the driving range, the practice facilities onto the golf course, it's a big challenge that personally I've had, and I know millions of golfers have. Why is that?
Yeah, Devin, we're just talking off air, and I said you could have started with an easier question. But it's a good question, and it's one that really led me to do what I was doing now, because I was the same. At 19, I think I was thinking, if I perfect it on the range, then surely I'm going to go on the golf course and everything will be magical. And the more I practice on the range, the worse I seem to get on the golf course. So I haven't got the answer, but I think I've got a couple of clues now to sort of understand why that practice doesn't transfer. And I think one thing just to start off with is really, golfers assume that when you practice, you're going to get better. And I think a better way to look at practice is actually to ask, why should you get better? Because learning is really expensive. We've got a huge aptitude to learn as humans, but essentially you've got to force the body to adapt and change. And it's got to make a lot of, physiological, neurological changes to do so. So practice for the sake of practice, just like going to the gym and lifting a tiny weight, isn't always going to make you better or adapt in certain ways. So I think that's the first question, is just sit back and look at, well, what are you classing as practice? And for me, practice is everything from putting at home on a mat to actually playing in the British Open. And I think, the best type of practice you can get for winning the British Open is playing the British Open over and over again. But sadly, we're not fortunate enough to do that. So I think when you sort of start to say, well, what do we class as practice? And you and I, as standard human beings who have a range and a golf course, what can we do? And we've really got two options normally, which is we can go to the range and we can hit hundreds of balls. We get a huge amount of volume, but that isn't at all representative of the golf course, which is one of the issues. Or we can go to the golf course, which is wonderfully representative of how we compete. But within 4 hours, you're going to hit 14 drives. And we know that you need a huge volume to try and actually get better at a skill. That's been something that's been shown for many years. So I think when we sort of have this problem of, well, how are we going to practice to get better on the golf course? First of all, you must do both. You must spend a good amount of time hitting balls to get some volume. But you must also get on the golf course and practice that skill of, okay, I hit a driver every 30 minutes. And every time I stand to hit a golf shot, the lie is slightly different. The wind's slightly different. I've got to do all of this decision making in my head. But I think there's actually two other ways that you can hopefully accelerate that learning. The first one is actually to make the range more representative of the environment. So what I do a lot with sort of the elite guys and girls that I work with is just skills games, just basic skills games on the range, where we start to try and create practice structures that have boundaries, have scores, have some sort of consequence to them. And that's sort of certainly one way that you can sort of, you lose a little bit of volume, but you can actually go through that decision-making process and you can get that sort of variability that we have on the golf course a little bit more. And the other way, which I think is really, really useful, and again, I don't want to get shouted at. So obviously when you can get access to the golf course, is to do a little bit more multi-ball practice. So whether that's just hitting a few extra tee shots around, I've got a nice game, Wedge Challenge, which I got taught many years ago from an old pro of mine, Keith Preston, where you hit a shot from 125, 175 yards and see how many birdies you can make around a little 9-hole course. That type of practice is fantastic because rather than hitting one or two wedge shots in 2 hours, you can actually get 27 wedge shots and you can really start to sort of build up that volume in the representative environment. So I think that's sort of the best stab I've got at that question.
You'll be getting a few players banned from golf clubs.
Well, this is it. You know, there's some nice small 9-hole facilities where this is able. Sometimes, if you're at a very quiet club, you're able. But yeah, please ask permission first. Don't blame me.
Yeah, I'm going to take you back to a couple of points that you mentioned. The why one initially. About why you actually practice. Yeah, how many golfers actually ask themselves that question before they go out there? Well, it'll be minimal, I would think. But as you say, it is just so important because when you go onto the course, when you're playing competitively, let's face it, you want to be a confident, resilient person out there, don't you?
Yeah.
If your practice isn't actually developing your confidence or your resilience, well, yeah, what's the point?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, and you can sort of dive down a level deeper and look at what skills you're practicing and why. Because as you know, as a very competent golfer, there's not all shots are equal. So there's certain shots, and strokes gain's got a little bit better at helping us understand, what shots may be more beneficial. But there's certain shots that do need a lot of practice. There's other ones which don't and really won't affect your score so much. And I think the danger with looking at strokes gained is, for tour players, the important shots are not the same as amateurs. So we'll say, well, short game isn't important because strokes gained, short game never, differentiates winners on tour. But if you miss every green, short game's hugely important. It really is. Or if you play in the wind, short game's probably really important because it is going to be a factor. So I think people just having a very basic understanding of, here's how I play golf and here's some basic stats, right? What shall I practice and why? And then how shall I practice that? And trying to understand, well, yeah, should it be on the range or should it be on the golf course? That would be, a really useful approach for anyone to take.
Yeah, I like that. So I'll take you back to what you mentioned there about stats then.
Yeah.
So some people obviously are a bit nerdy and geeky in that way and that they love stats. Other golfers don't. How can you just simplify the process for those golfers that maybe don't necessarily like doing it, but really need to?
It doesn't have to be complicated. So even if you just grab a bit of paper and you just put 14 X's for where your drive's finished, and then you just draw a circle and you put 18 X's and you count up your putts and you see how many times you go up and down. That should take 5-6 minutes. And actually it does two things. It gives you those sort of basic metrics, which aren't perfect. People argue about fairways in regulation and greens in regulation, but you get an idea of how well you drove it and, how well you putted. But secondly, what I love is the dispersion, because you can come off the course and you can think, I keep missing driver right. And I've done this before. I remember doing this around Hoylake once, and I actually only missed 2 drives right. And the other 12 are all center or left. But those 2 drives right really stuck in my mind. And obviously the whole round, I was trying not to hit it right. So I think that sort of reflection, I suppose, after playing is something that I feel is such a cheap, easy win. If you're going to go and do 2 hours practice, please spend 6 minutes doing stats, because that 6 minutes is going to inform the next 2 hours just incredibly. Yeah,
which I suppose takes me back to the psychological side of things there. So what would you say are the benefits of compiling stats up here in your brain?
When you're playing or afterwards? Or
both in practice and so, competitively playing?
I'll be honest, it can have a negative effect as well. So that and I've had this with players, and it is a challenge. So first of all, it's good because I suppose from a self-efficacy standpoint, you can use it as sort of performance accomplishments in terms of, well, I know I hold 98% of putts inside 4 feet. Now, if you're standing over a 4-footer and you've got that data, you should feel confident, and I'd even be, worse than that. I'd think, well, I've just missed one, so I'm not going to miss one for another, however many putts based on. So I think you can use that data to sort of build those blocks of confidence, which are useful. I think also you can track your development with stats, which is really useful to go, well, I used to be a 6 out of 10 iron player. Now I'm a 7 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. And again, that's a great way of using it for developing confidence. But the downside is that if you get someone who thinks they're good at something and they keep getting, say, a negative strokes gain stat, they say to me, oh, I thought I was all right. I thought I hit the ball well today, but these stats are telling me that I didn't. And that is the offset of that, which is, you can negatively affect people's self-efficacy, I think, from using stats. So it's not perfect, but, if it was easy, then, we wouldn't have jobs for a start, would we?
Most definitely. I suppose the point you touch on there is probably the importance of having a golf professional, a coach who is actually going to sit back from time to time with you and look at the stats, because it's very easy to tell yourself a story about something. Let's face it, the brain's biased up here to think negatively.
Yeah.
So, we're always going to probably pull out a lot of the negative stuff. So that, to me, certainly does highlight the importance of having a good support system around you in that way.
Definitely. And it was something I wasn't aware of until I tried to write a couple of pieces around it, which did really well. And then I've tried to help people over the last 9 months doing sort of some basic planning. And it surprises me. People are we have like a 10 handicapper hitting 12 greens around, thinking they need to work on ball striking. And I'm thinking, I barely hit 12 greens around. I'm supposedly a pro. So you're right that that awareness of actually, well, what should I be doing? And there's no one way of playing golf. That's the wonderful thing. I think we had Tom Boyes, spoke to Tom Boyes, who's a very good performance analyst and works with Tommy Fleetwood. And he says everyone has their like unique player profile, if you like. And I've just stolen that. And I'm like, that's amazing. So, we need to get someone to +4. Well, this person may be, 1.5 off driving and then the rest putting, but you could have someone else who's, like an incredible iron player. So everyone has their sort of unique profile that they're trying to build. But I think sitting down with a professional or someone and just saying, well, what's your aim? And then what do you as that level golfer look like? And then what's the gap and how do we get there? That essentially is common sense, but it's great performance work. Just trying to make the route to becoming a great golfer really clear, really concise. You'll start 6 months down the line. It will feel chaotic and you'll be miles off track. But having that plan, I think, is a super useful way to actually progress.
Yeah, because I suppose golf being the sport it can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're a young professional golfer who's just turned professional. You go from playing amateur events where there's you're playing 4, 5, 6 times a week, if you like, to then you have a tournament every now and again, and you've got to actually plan your time. It can be quite overwhelming where you're overthinking an awful lot, to say the least.
I feel tennis and golf are probably two of the unique sports, and I can't speak for tennis. You obviously got great stars like Emma Raducanu coming through now without a coach saying she's learning and managing her way. But I think what people don't realize is, unlike say rugby, football, where you get paid weekly, you're looked after, you're told what to do when, golfers have to decide, where am I going? How much money am I spending? Who am I employing for psych? Who am I employing as a coach? Am I doing this right? And what I've found with structuring practice for a few pros is it's a relief just to say, oh, I don't have to worry about that. And I tend to give them like, well, here's say 10 tasks, try and tick off 70, 80% a week. I don't mind when you do it, just fit it in. And for that's sort of a huge weight off their shoulders to go, oh my God, I don't have to worry about this and if I'm doing it right or this and that. And they can actually just focus on trying to get better. So that was, again, it was a learning that I kind of had when I was trying to see how good I could get at golf. But that pressure is elevated on those people that are challenged to a Euro Pro and spending, 20, 40,000 a year and hopefully trying to break even, making that back in winnings. That's a tough life.
Yeah, I suppose if I think back to like my job here as a sports psychologist, so I'm working with clients on an individual level or in a group level for 15, 20 hours of the week. But then for the other 20, 30 hours of the week, I'm doing administration tasks. We're doing podcasts, a whole range of different things. And it's the same in some ways as a professional golfer, that you've got tasks that you're likely to do that you don't enjoy doing, and it's very easy just to procrastinate and put them off.
No, I don't think Kevin De Bruyne is spending much of his time worrying about admin tasks away from football, is he? I think he's just turning up and focusing on being phenomenal. So yeah, we're in a unique position, but I think it's wonderful that those services are something that can really benefit a player. I think many coaches maybe they are aware of it, but it's sort of a lack of understanding that this could really help a player get better without changing their golf swing. Just giving them sort of this sort of clearer plan of how to improve and how to use their time. Because from what I've seen over the last sort of 5-6 years of doing this, no one's doing it very well, and it is through no fault of their own. It's just no one teaches you how to manage that time and that holistic approach to trying to be a golfer.
Yeah, let's be honest. When you come out of school at 16, 17, 18, as these guys do, your organisational skills aren't the best, and you really do need some guidance there.
And yeah, I'm experiencing that at the moment. Head of Exeter University, I'm letting people go and make mistakes, but then I'm thinking, oh dear me, come on, we've dropped the ball here a few times. But you've got to learn. You've got to learn, and that's the way to learn.
Massively. You mentioned there about you would get someone to have, say, 10 tasks, and you would like them to complete 70-80% of the time. And again, I'm going to take you back to the negative bias in the brain, because
come on then.
Yeah, a lot of people those 10 tasks, if they didn't tick those 10 tasks off, they're going to be in their own heads, and in a way feeling like week by week, if I had 10 tasks to do and I don't tick all 10 off, I'm playing catch up, and they're being quite negative and critical in their own minds. So yeah, I like that 70-80% rule where you cut yourself a little bit of slack there.
And I learned it from just doing it wrong, if I'm honest, because the first time I'd structure Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then you realize we're in England and it's sideways rain for 6 hours on Monday. So are you really going to do 2 hours putting? And the feedback I got from the pros was, if I miss Monday, I then feel like I've ruined the rest of the week. So it was only through that process that I realized that we have to have that flexibility of, well, here's 10. If you do get 70%, you will get better. And then on the flip side, we keep their practice scores. So if their practice scores are going up, they know they're getting better, which is great. And they know that links to their overall goal of lower stroke average. So yeah, it's quite nice to work it that way. But it was purely, luck and sort of muddling my way through that we got to that point.
I'm not sure like where you are there. You say you're in Exeter, because I'm in Newcastle and we don't see rain or snow.
Yeah, I know. It's Newcastle and Florida, isn't it? Yeah, side by side.
Exactly. Yeah, this is good. We could talk about this for hours. Let's have a little think a bit more about the practice side. So in my book, again, a lot of golfers can be guilty of just simply focusing on technical practice, or putting 80-90% of their time in as technical practice. What would you tell that golfer?
I'd ask them why, because it's not necessarily wrong. It's just at what point of the year and what's your goal. So I think there's 3 types of practice to sort of simplify things, which is technical practice, and whether we like it or not, you're swinging a lump of your metal around your body to hit a golf ball. There are more efficient ways of doing it, and certain things do need adapting. So we do need some sort of technical aspect to practice and to improve that. So there's technical practice, which I think is important. You then also have skill-based practice, which for me is here's a problem to solve. I don't care how you do it, just score as many points as possible. And in that sense, I suppose from emotion control, we call that sort of self-organizing and trying to just sort of find a sort of a solution. So I like players to get a sort of a sound technical structure and then just see how skillful they can get. And then I think there's a third type of practice, which is these skills games, but I suppose I call it psychological practice. You can shoot me down or help me here. But essentially, it's then, well, we're doing this, and maybe we say you have to get to X before you can finish. So there's some sort of pressure around there. And there is going to be some failure in there, but I'd like players to go through and try and understand what happens from a cognitive and a technical aspect when they perform under pressure. So for me personally, I think I've got like a putting game, simple putting game, 3, 6, 9 feet, got a whole 5 balls from every single one. If you miss at any point, you start again. Get back to 9 feet. For me, it was always a little bit of a tweak left. I sort of I knew I was going to do that. But in my mind, I knew that I probably didn't pick a clear enough target and I didn't make a good enough practice swing. And when I got over there, I didn't have the clarity of execution. So I'd play that game over and over and over again, so that when I got in tournament play, I knew my miss, I knew my weaknesses under pressure. And if I thought it was going to happen, I'd aim right and hope I pull it a bit. And people may say, well, that's not wrong. For me, that's performing well under pressure, is really understanding yourself as an individual and understanding yourself as a performer. So yeah, they're the 3 types of practice: technical, skill-based, and psych practice, pressure practice. Depending who the player is, where they are, what time of the season, we try and mix them up and blend them and get like an ideal fit. But there's no regimented, perfect solution to getting good at golf. Otherwise, again, we'd be out of a job, David, wouldn't we?
Exactly. Where you mentioned I suppose the psychological bit there and like putting pressure on people, would you also make sure that the person's going through their pre-shot routine precisely as they would do in a tournament in that way?
Yeah, it depends a bit on the task, because sometimes I want them to get a little bit more volume. Sometimes I really want them to get into the process of, being clear on their pre-shot routine and sort of a goals-based approach to a clear target, clear idea of what they're trying to do and execute. So I mix up, but this is more in your realm. So, I mean, I suppose you do a little bit of this with sort of simulation practice. What are your thoughts with this? Is it important to always go through a pre-shot routine when you're focusing on these areas, or where have you got to?
Interesting one, because I would actually argue maybe there could be another 2 layers to practice, but I don't know whether it just...
Please, no, go, come on.
Whether there's an overlap there, I'm not quite sure. We'll soon find out. So yeah, for me, if we say process practice, for argument's sake, is another element to it. I would believe that, most players should spend a small element of their time doing regular process practice in order so that when they are under pressure, they do feel like comfortable and confident in their routines and the way they go about things. And
is process sort of specifically that routine and that pre-shot routine? Is that what
Yeah. And I suppose the way I'm thinking is, if you've got let's say a very visual learner, then visualization in effect is something that you can get better at.
Yeah.
So why not? You may only actually hit 10 balls, for argument's sake. And those 10 balls, it could take you, 15 minutes, 20 minutes to actually hit those 10 balls. But during that time, you're going to stand there and you're going to really create the shot in your mind, be it a high draw, a low fade, whatever that is. And really tap into your imagination, seeing the trajectory in detail, the flight, where it's going to land, all of that stuff. Because I suppose the reason I say that is because when you have a chat with a golfer and you talk about, when you're at your best, you're under pressure, often the visual learner will tell you, I see things really, really clearly. Just my belief is that type of practice for that type of person is very, very helpful, and it's gonna aid the skill.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
No, agree. Yeah, agree. I think my understanding of the sort of the psychological aspect is I just haven't got the wealth of experience you have. So I feel like I do my best to try and structure this. I probably look at performance under pressure from a motor control standpoint. as much as a psych. And I think sometimes it aligns really well, and other times there's slight variances. But you said there was another type as well. So it was process. Was there another type as well? Which because again, I'm interested to hear.
Yeah. Well, so I suppose this maybe takes me back to my younger days when I hit ball after ball, and the Bernard Langer thing of trying to practice till your hands bled. And then, looking around and working with different players, you often see how like this drive, this motivation is fantastic. That's the thing that's, going to help people excel. But at the same time, they can end up in a situation where they're just trying so hard in practice, in tournaments, and they lose those childlike feelings, the light touch on the grip, being able to play the lovely fancy lob shot, all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, in that type of situation, I like to say to a player, well, what about creative practice?
I love it.
Like fun practice, if you like, just so you actually get that feeling, that lightness in your shoulders, that, and so again, I would advocate that type of player would get involved in playing the high draws and the just having some fun, really. But
which is something you see kids do the whole time.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get to, I suppose, adulthood and professionalism, and you almost as if, wow, I'm not going to do that anymore. It sort of goes out. Yeah, I was helping a player out. We've got an amazing short game area at Exeter University, and I was helping a player out in the nets, and behind me there was 8+ handicappers seeing how much spin they could get from 40 yards to this back pin. And they were going, you got to flip your hands more. You got to flip your hands more. And I thought, this is brilliant. They were having so much fun trying to hit the shot. And just as you said, it's that being a kid, not caring about how, it's just, how much fun you can have. So I think it's critical for people. And I think it's the very technical, logical, mechanical ones that need that the most. And from my experience, they hate doing it because they want something structured and they want to have a point, but they're the ones that often benefit from just going and having fun. And can I hook chips? What happens if I catch it a bit thin? Can I fat it? Awful stuff that you would hate to do. But I think that exploring is really useful. And I think from a motor control standpoint, we understand why, I suppose. If we have really rigid movements, we have no ways of adapting them. That's not helpful. So I think this is more about creating, I suppose, like a broader motor sensory landscape of a skill, and understanding how adjusting certain parameters feels and what it does. I think that helps the body plan and potentially execute shots in certain situations.
Yeah, that makes sense, because let's face it, as you mentioned, you get on the golf course and no shots are the same.
No,
lies the same, being able to, I think, spend some time playing those creative type shots is going to give you that element of confidence and psychologically quieten the mind when you're under pressure in that type of situation. Before we wrap up, I'm interested in terms of, right at the start, you mentioned about pressure practice and consequences there. So what are your thoughts on making your practice, or an element of your practice, really, really tough?
So difficulty and consequence, I'd say, are two different things. Should we talk about difficulty? Because I think that's something. So I think when I look at what most golfers lack in practice, it's 2 points, I feel. So from a research standpoint, we have practice variability as like the poster child. Everyone talks about practice variability, blocked, varied, random practice. And it is useful, but I just think the effect's really small and we care a bit too much about it. Whereas when I look at golfers and what stops them getting better, I feel it's 2 things. The first is feedback, is having clear feedback on shot outcome, and also sort of what caused that shot. And then the second one is practice difficulty, which I think ties in. So I think they're the 2 things. And what I would say is, when you first start playing golf, the precision of feedback's fine, because did the ball go up in the air and did it go forward or not? And that's it. But when you get to, say, a 2 handicap like yourself, well, did it go 48 yards through the air, or did it go 46 yards through the air? And did it land 2.5 feet right or 4.5 feet right? And can you remember what happened for the last 10 shots? So I think things like TrackMan and GC2, GC Quad can actually add in that augmented feedback that helps golfers get better. And it can keep practice simple. It can be used to make golf way too complicated. But I think that feedback is really useful in helping golfers get better. And I think the next generation of players are going to be so much more precise because they've grown up with this feedback the whole way through training. So that's sort of on feedback. Then on practice difficulty, this is the other thing that I think is the issue with the range, where people go and they hit 10 drives and they go, yeah, I'm driving it great, and I'm going to go to the golf course. And all of a sudden you've got a 30-yard fairway out of bounds down the left and trees down the right. And all of a sudden you think, oh God, what am I going to do here? So around practice difficulty, there's a few different points. I think, first of all, you can make practice difficult in two different ways. You can make the target smaller, which means that you have to be more precise, or you can ask for more successful reps, which is pushing consistency. And if you look at great golfers, they're really precise and they're really consistent. So again, before a golfer goes to practice, I want to know, do you want to improve your precision, consistency, or both? And then let's say we've got a driving challenge. Well, if you want to improve precision and your average fairway is 40 yards, make it 20 yards. And can I hit, how many out of 10 can I get down that 20-yard gap? And you'll get more precise. So even when you hit bad drives, they'll just miss the target, but they'd still be in your 40-yard fairway. If you want to improve consistency, I'd say, well, make that fairway 30 yards wide. And can you get 10 out of 10 down there? Or how many out of 10 can you get down there? So you're more focused on a broader target and making sure everyone goes down there. And I think those actually then help your body learn and push you to accelerate your learning, because you're setting a level of difficulty which is useful and telling your body, this solution isn't good enough, or I need to find a different way of doing it. And I spoke to Kevin Kirk, who's a phenomenal coach in America, and coached Patrick Reed for many years. And what he does at his academy is he sets that practice should be 10% harder than what's needed in play. And I think that's a great metric. So if you're trying to hit, 50% of greens, well, at just 55%, if you're trying to hit 60% of fairways, add 10%, 6%, and that should be your target. And again, I think it links back to the psychological aspect of, if you know that your training is harder than what you need to do in competition and you can do it in training, it is that I'm competent enough to do it. So I think practice difficulty is a big thing. How you do it is really adapting the practice environment and setting your own boundaries, unless you have access to play Augusta every day, which none of us do, sadly. I think it's critical. Does that give a bit of a nuance into how to implement it? Yeah,
no, I do. I really like that. And you've shared some great insights on how people can actually go about it. Because again, as golf is an individual sport, it is generally up to the player to decide how they're going to go about practicing. And often people will just get very comfortable, won't they? You talked about narrowing the fairways there and precision. Well, often people's precision will just start there, and then it just gets wider and wider during an hour or 2 hour practice session. Can I put a caveat in with that? You get the crazed golfer who goes, right, I'm going to make everything as challenging as possible, which maybe you and I would have been growing up, because we were similar ilk of trying to hit as many golf balls as possible. That is just as pointless as having too easy practice. So there's some research around like challenge point framework, which really says that you have this sort of sweet spot of difficulty, which is a little bit more challenging than what you're capable of. So I think just be aware that making practice brutal so that there's never success is damaging, so it's really understanding it should be a little bit harder. And there's times when you can really push and make practice challenging. There's other times where you want to make it easy and actually just develop confidence and, feel very competent at what you're doing. So again, that goes through the season as well and can be periodized. Yeah. I was going to look to wrap this up, but you've just opened up.
I've got time. If you want to ask anything else, it's absolutely fine. Yeah.
So, strengths-based approaches in psychology are well backed up in a range of different sports. And again, it's not often something I would hear from a golfer, where they would potentially look at their skill set and see, whether maybe they're a great driver of the ball. They wouldn't necessarily then look to think, well, okay, I'm a great driver. How can I actually get even better and better? And then go about structuring a training plan, a practice plan to do so. I don't know. What are your thoughts on strengths-based approaches to practice?
I think it's something that I naively overlooked for years. But it has two facets to it. If someone's already good at something, they're doing a lot right, and why not make it exceptional? So yeah, I think I always sit down with a player and try and understand, well, where are you already good, and can we make it better? And then, what are your weaknesses, or where are some areas to improve, and what should we do there? Yeah, it's more critical than you first realize, because, well, that's their strength, and you can build a whole game around certain strengths. If someone's a phenomenal driver or a phenomenal putter, you want to make sure that's as good as possible. But I feel that bleeds over into other areas of the game. It's like, if you can make that exceptional, it can really take the pressure off other areas of their game as well. But then also, golfers love practicing what they're good at, and they hate practicing their weaknesses, because no one wants to feel incompetent. So I think it's also important just to, manage their sort of belief or confidence, or whatever you'd like to describe it as a performer, to keep doing that. So yeah, I think strengths are important. It's not just about where are my areas to improve. It's looking at those strengths and how you can keep growing them as well.
Yeah, it's certainly something I've looked at from time to time with different players. Because again, if you go back to the player who's potentially struggling, they often have the mindset of, I just need to work on the things that I need to improve upon. And then again, that means they're sort of walking in treacle, and they're trying so hard. And yeah, you can just see from the body language and facial expressions that this is
really a grind.
Work. Yeah, it's a grind, as you say. So being able then to actually flip that and say, well, yeah, what are your strengths? And then, why don't you just work on that, spend some time on that for a period? That actually might just, as you say, help your confidence, and then it'll also filter into other parts of your game. Yeah, it can be useful. One thing I suppose on that topic though is, again, this is something I'll see. Some players wouldn't actually want to take extra responsibility to improve their already strength out of fear, and also a little bit out of complacency. So
what do you mean with fear? Out of fear in that one?
Yeah, well, okay. So say you're a 9 out of 10 in terms of your driving. I'll stick with driving. And they maybe practice driving for 2 hours a week, arguably, roughly around about that. They wouldn't want to put in extra time to practice the driver, out of fear in case they actually get worse and they harm that. I've seen that. And then also out of complacency as well. Well, why do I need to practice something I'm good at anyway? Because
I can already do it.
Yeah, I can come into it.
So I think with that, and this is, I love stats. This is the great thing about stats, is it's not saying where you are, it's actually being able to model what will happen. So I think I'd make a case for, well, actually, if you hit it 20 yards further off the tee, you're going to gain this amount of shots. Or, if we could improve your good drives, which is on the PGA Tour, fairways hit, or times you miss the fairway, but you still hit the green, which is a nice stat. It's a very good stat. If we could improve that by 6%, we think we'll save you 0.6 of a shot. Now, 0.6 of a shot, if you're a PGA Tour player, is worth, crikey, if you're middle of the pack, I don't know, 800,000, $1 million, over the course of a year. So I think the nice thing about having some numbers is you can kind of make some very simple justifications. And maybe it is, there's not a case for that. It's only 0.2 of a shot that you're going to improve if you hit this marker. But we actually feel that these will help the positive traits move into your iron play, and it's going to take the pressure off your short game. And, we know you hit X amount more greens when you drive it here. Let's try and do that more often, because your chipping is a weakness at the moment. But, having this extra distance or this accuracy will actually alleviate that, and you'll have less chips around. Yeah, there's different ways of selling it, but we're so much further on than we were 20 years ago, but it still requires many hunches of what we think is going to make people better, doesn't it, as working in performance sport. And I'm very honest with players when I say I don't know. And I'm sure I feel psychology is still the one where it's a phenomenal skill because it's harder to quantify. So I think, your ability to actually rationalize what is important for people is critical, isn't it? So, I mean, you must have quite a few times where you're suggesting something, but I don't know how you get that across to the player in a way that they understand it or buy in.
Yeah, I think one of the skills for in our line of work is questioning, and in some ways is really trying to empower the player and in effect park your own ego. Have the mentality that actually the player is the expert. They know their game inside out. So yeah, ask the right questions, challenging questions. So then they make up their own mind.
Fantastic.
Have those blue light moments.
Yeah, amazing.
That would be more my approach as opposed to telling, right, you should do this.
Yeah, awesome.
Anyway, yeah. So as we begin to wrap up, can you give the listeners 3 key takeaways from our conversation for someone who really is looking to improve?
David, I forgot about this point. Just had a blind blank. I hopefully I can. So I think number 1, if you actually do really want to get better at golf, just keep some very basic numbers. Doesn't have to be anything amazing, but keep some basic numbers so you can say where you are and areas to improve. Number 2, I think before you go and practice, ask yourself what you're doing and why. You scribble it down. I think scribbling it down and just sort of saying, well, what you're doing and why. And number 3 is on the range, just build yourself simple games that give you clear feedback and allow you to progress difficulty. And again, I've got a few that we can put some links to if people want it for the range and other bits. So there'd be my 3 points. Brilliant.
I love that. Nice and simple. That's the way it should be, because it can be a very complicated game. And on them drills, feel free to email me them through and I will do show notes.
Yeah.
Whereabouts can listeners reach out to you, Will, if they want to ask you a question or get in touch?
Yeah, so we were talking before this. So for the last few years, I've built Golf Insider UK, as sort of the resource that I wish I had as a kid, I suppose, growing up. So they can find me at golfinsideruk.com. I am with that handle on Twitter and Instagram. I'm really bad on social media. So if you find me a message through the website, that only comes through to me. So I pick all of them up. So feel free to drop me a question or anything else.
Excellent. Love the conversation. Yeah, big thank you for your time.
Me too. It's been great fun.
Wow, that was brilliant. It was so much fun. There's certainly a lot more to practicing your golf than whacking ball after ball at a driving range or hitting putt after putt in the comfort of your own home. One thing for sure is that there's no set way to transferring your skills from practice to the course under pressure with a card in your hand. Every individual will and myself support are unique. We're all motivated by different things. We've got different personality styles. Therefore, this has an impact on our levels of focus in practice and again on the golf course. Many high performers are borderline perfectionists, which can work for them in lots of ways with their work ethic, with their drive. But there's a dark side too to perfectionism. It can cause people to be fearful, to be cautious at times. And when their B game or their C game comes out, they can really struggle to deal with things out there on the golf course. And if we're honest, the B game and the C game comes out an awful lot more than our A games. So it's really important to be able to manage. Then you've got the fact that some people are social creatures and they work better with people around them, whereas others are better left to their own devices. Some people are great planners, whereas others get overwhelmed at the thought of planning and procrastinate. Then some people love numbers and they're stats fanatics, whereas others find it a big turn-off. Some love spending hours and hours working on technique or learning new shots, whereas others hate that and they prefer to spend their time on the golf course. It's critical, if you want to get the most from your talent, that you understand your preferences. You understand how your personality helps you and how it holds you back. No one's perfect. There's no set way. I'd really encourage you, if you want to be able to transfer your skills over to tournament play, to get your pen and paper out and answer these few questions. Number 1, how much time on average do I practice my golf on a weekly basis? Secondly, now what I'd like you to do is break down your practice. Consider the following 4 areas. You've got technical practice, where you're trying to hone a skill, perhaps your golf swing. You're trying to perfect it, if you like. or you make it better. Then you've got performance practice. This is where stats come into play. So you might have a skills challenge. Perhaps you have 9 putts from 3 foot, 6 foot, and 9 foot, and you record how well you've done. And you do this on a regular basis. So it gives you feedback. You can see if you're improving or not. And then this should tie into your technical practice. Then we've got process practice. So this is about your pre-shot routine. It's clearly defining your pre-shot routine firstly, and then actually going about spending some time practicing it. So then when you are under pressure, when it does count, you've got something to rely upon, something to feel comfortable and confident in. Lastly is creative or fun practice. Because let's face it, if you go through a bad patch or things simply get repetitive and boring, having those lighter moments, experiencing those childlike moments, those free moments that make you feel good is vital. So now let's go on and work out in percentage terms how much time you typically practice in these areas, these 4 areas. And a common theme I find with highly motivated and borderline perfectionist golfers who struggle with trusting themselves under pressure is that technical practice will likely be in excess of 70% of their time, often 90% and 100% of their time, whereas the rest, the performance, the process, and the creative practice often gets overlooked. Next question would be, consider what type of practice is the most fun and helps you feel like a child, playing with a smile, fearlessly, with light hands, soft hands on the grip. And the last question would be, what do you need to change so that your practice helps you become a more confident and resilient golfer? This is really important. I hope that this has helped you look at things differently and it's challenged your thoughts. If you'd like to work out where some of your blind spots are, myself and my team are highly skilled at helping golfers and athletes get the most from their talent and abilities. So please do drop me an email, info@sport-excellence.co.uk. That is info@sport-excellence.co.uk, or feel free to reach out to me on social media. Next week, we'll have a compilation episode, as it's number 90, episode 90 of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast. Then we'll return to this topic again to help you get the most out of your practice or training. Have a fun week ahead. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sport psychology resources. The Sport-Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.